Well, there are several new developments this morning following yesterday's terrorist attack on the United States, an event of such enormity it's still difficult to absorb. But first, a look at the scene in New York. Firefighters and rescue crews worked through the night in the rubble of the World Trade Center towers, or what used to be the Trade Center towers. Less than 24 hours ago, two hijacked planes crashed into the buildings. Another plane hit the Pentagon. It is feared thousands are dead.
Meanwhile, this morning's Herald is reporting that 5 Arab men have been identified as suspects, and a car parked in a garage at Logan Airport has been seized. Apparently, a passenger got into a fight with a couple of men and told authorities they thought it was suspicious and might want to look into this, and so far it was. Flight training manuals were also found in the car. We have live team coverage this morning, starting with WBZ national correspondent Jennifer Jones. She is live in Washington, D.C. Jennifer, good morning.
Well, usually this time of morning, commuters are beginning to clog the roadways as they head into work. But today, there is an eerie calm about the nation's capital. You can still see smoke coming from the Pentagon, and that gaping hole, just a part of the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. This is the scene as crews continue to search for survivors and victims. A thick coating of dust covers the wasteland of twisted steel and rubble, the remains of what was once a shining symbol of America. Just yesterday, the screams of panic and faces of horror were like scenes from a movie. Real-life terror as 2 hijacked airliners carrying scores of passengers slammed into the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center.
Chaos. It's just chaos out here, it really is. So the Twin Towers fall. It's amazing. It's crazy.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the Pentagon also came under attack when a 3rd hijacked plane crashed into the sprawling military complex, killing as many as 800 people. And yet, a 4th hijacked passenger plane was reduced to rubble after it crashed south of Pittsburgh, a final blow that may have spared the presidential retreat of Camp David, the alleged target. In the aftermath, President Bush made it clear that justice will prevail for those who are responsible.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Back in New York, emergency crews are working at their grim task. While the full extent of the damage and loss of life remains unknown, the heart of America has been changed forever. Now, rescue workers have set up a makeshift morgue outside of the Pentagon as they pull bodies from the debris. Meanwhile, sources say the FBI is searching sites in Central and South Florida where information has turned up, placing supporters of terrorist fugitive Osama bin Laden aboard the crashed jets. That is the latest from Washington. I'm Jennifer Jones. Now back to you.
All right, Jennifer, thank you. And obviously a lot of questions here in Boston still unanswered, including Logan Airport. What's going on out there? Well, it is still closed like all airports all across the country.
Meanwhile, at this hour, hundreds of federal investigators are at Logan trying to determine how 2 jets from Boston could have been hijacked within minutes of each other. WBZ's Dan Ray is live at the Hyatt near the airport, and he has the very latest information for us this morning. Dan, good morning.
Good morning, Scott, and good morning, Carrie. Indeed, 2 of the planes that were hijacked yesterday were hijacked here from Logan Airport, and they both were hijacked, I should say, each was hijacked through a different terminal. So there were really 2 terminals, 2 airlines involved here, and that is of great concern to security officials. Now, both newspapers, Boston newspapers this morning, the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald, are beginning to report some information which might begin to help identify some of these suspects. The Herald is reporting that investigators seized a car in the parking garage here at Logan Airport. Inside the car were reportedly Arabic language flight training manuals. The source says that 5 Arab men had been identified as suspects, including 1 who was a trained pilot. At least 2 of the suspects flew to Boston's Logan Airport, reportedly on Tuesday from Portland, Maine. Their authorities believe that they had traveled after crossing the border from Canada only recently. The bags of one of the men did not make the connection here in Boston, and the Boston Globe reported that those bags contained a copy of the Quran and instruction videotapes on flying commercial airliners, as well as consumption calculators. The FBI in Boston refusing to comment. we have been unable to confirm these specific reports. Meanwhile, Logan Airport is still closed, as other airports are around the country. When word of the crashes in New York arrived here yesterday, the airport was immediately shut down. Several flights were still out on the tarmac at the time. The pilots, however, had to tell passengers what was going on, and the flights were returned to their terminals. While there are many unanswered questions this morning, one thing that Massport was able to tell us, air travel in the U.S. is about to change dramatically.
We do not have a time at this point when U.S. airports will be allowed to reopen. However, we will be going to a briefing following this press briefing with all of the airlines and other operating entities here at Logan Airport to prepare for what we think will be significant changes in the way U.S. airports will be conducting their business going forward. We believe a number of those orders or directives from FAA will entail a lot of the things we experienced during the Gulf War, and perhaps more. We will be looking at things such as reducing access points to the secure side of our airfield. We will be stepping up the random ID checks that go on at U.S. airports routinely. We will be reducing, we believe, restricted areas to operational minimums.
Now, besides all of those security concerns that Logan Airport and Massport have to deal with going forward, they're also dealing with the grief of family members who have lost loved ones on either of those flights out of Boston yesterday. Some people have reported hearing some airplanes overhead. We're told that there have been some limited flights coming in here, so-called special care teams arriving at Logan Airport to provide grief counseling to family members and close relatives of people who died on those two crashes that came out of Boston yesterday. So a lot of activity here at Logan Airport. The investigation certainly continues to be centered here at Logan Airport as police authorities here, as well as federal investigators, try to begin to understand exactly how this tragedy, these horrible, horrific tragedies, actually suicide attacks, began here from Logan Airport. Massport will be holding a news conference here later today at the Hyatt Harborside Hotel. We'll be following that, as well as other developments here at Logan Airport. We know that Logan will be closed until at least noon today, and we suspect that probably of all the airports in the country, Logan probably be one of the last to open up, along with Dulles in Washington, probably the New York airports as well. We'll be here throughout the day and try to keep our fingers on the pulse of whatever's going on over here throughout the day. It should be another long day at Logan Airport. If you have an early morning flight, don't even bother to come out to the airport. For now, Dan Ray live out at Logan Airport. Back to you, Scott and Kerry.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. If you had a relative on board any of the flights affected yesterday, including the two from Logan, you can call these numbers for information. The Massport hotline is 617-568-3100. 617-568-3100. That is the Massport number. Now, the American Airlines hotline number is 1-800-245-0999. It's right there on your screen, 1-800-245-0999. And the special number for United Airlines is 1-800-932-8555. 800-932-8555. And of course, many of you wanting to know who was on board these planes. We are getting new information on the list of people on board the two planes that left here from Boston. This is not a complete list by any means, but we do have several names having been made available to us, and here they are as we have them right now. Among the dead, Ken Waldy, a Raytheon employee from Methuen. Peter Gay, also an employee of Raytheon. He lived in Andover. Richard Ross, a 58-year-old man who ran a consulting firm in Newton. Neely Casey of Wellesley. Mark Bavis, he was a Boston University graduate from Providence, a great hockey player, Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island native. He is an ice hockey scout, or was the scout for the National Hockey League's Los Angeles Kings.
Now, Garnet Ace Bailey was 53. He's of Linfield. He was the director of pro scouting for the Los Angeles Kings hockey team. He was also a former Boston Bruins player. David and Lynn Angel. He was the executive producer of the NBC TV show Frasier. The couple was returning from their home in Chatham. Daniel Lewin, 31 years old, the co-founder of Akamai Technologies in Cambridge. Brian Sweeney, 38 years old, of Barnstable, and Jane Orth, 49, of Haverhill.
And others on our preliminary lists: John Cahill of Wellesley, Tom McGinnis, pilot, the co-pilot of the American Airlines Flight 11. He was Portsmouth, New Hampshire man. Pilot John Oganowski, he lived in Dracut. He was the pilot of the American Airlines flight. Also, Tara Creamer of Worcester, an employee of TJ Maxx. In fact, there were several employees of TJ Maxx on that flight. Ted Hennessy of Belmont, and Peter, Susan, and Christine Hansen, all from Massachusetts. As we mentioned, the pilot and co-pilot of the American Airlines Flight 11 out of Boston yesterday morning were both from New England.
52-year-old John Oganowski was the pilot of the flight. He lived with his wife and 3 daughters at a farm in Dracut, Mass. Oganowski's brother is in the Air National Guard, and he wants to help avenge these murders.
This is quite a cowardly act, what we have seen today, attacking civilians, not military. Whatever it takes, my unit will be involved, and I would like to be the first one to step forward and be involved with that.
Meantime, residents in Portsmouth, New Hampshire are remembering co-pilot Tom McGinnis with purple ribbons. Also, hundreds of his neighbors attended a special service last night in Greenland. And of course, we will have more from this list for you as the morning progresses along. We'll certainly bring it to you as soon as we get it.
Hundreds of federal buildings all over the country were evacuated yesterday, including those here in Boston. Those folks are going to be going back to work this morning.
And WBZ's Christina Hager joins us from downtown Boston with the latest. Christina.
Well, Carrie, that's right. This morning, it's back to business for all those state employees who were sent home early yesterday, but it's still unclear whether the high-rises like the John Hancock building behind me and the Prudential Center will be reopening in the wake of yesterday's terrorist attack. Police were on alert in Boston's Back Bay last night after attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. Thousands of employees had been evacuated from Boston high-rises as people worried about terrorists on American soil.
I think about the Twin Towers and them not being there anymore. I mean, I grew up in New York and I used to see them all the time, so it's just amazing they're not there anymore.
I definitely picked up the phone right away and called everybody that I could think of. Unfortunately, most of the phone lines were busy or down in New York, so it was kind of tough.
1,500 state-owned buildings were locked and staffed with extra police, and flags were at half-staff throughout the state. But no gesture could reflect the sense of hopelessness, anger, and pain people were feeling.
It does affect all of us, even if you're not in one of those areas where the catastrophe actually occurred. It's still just to be a witness to that and just to see what's going on. It's very difficult.
But my biggest concern now is to continue to protect the families in Massachusetts and to make sure that we have the right investigative resources being deployed to the assistance of the FBI so we can find the people who perpetrated this awful act of cowardice and bring them to justice.
And Acting Governor Jane Swift is also calling for people to return to business as usual today, if that is at all possible. She'll be back in the State House after working out of the state bunker in Framingham all day yesterday. Back to work for city and state employees, but all federal buildings in the state will be closed, and of course that includes all the federal courthouses. Live in Boston, Christina Hager, WBZ-4 News. Back to you, Scott and Carrie.
All right, Christina, we'll be checking back with you throughout the morning. We're going to be breaking from the news now and get a check on our weather forecast.
Here's Barry Burbank in the weather office with the forecast. Barry.
Good morning, Carrie. Good morning, Scott. It's a clear and cool morning. Nothing really going on. Let's check some of the numbers. We have some readings in the 40s at 60 in Boston this morning. It's 63 degrees down in New York City, where it's clear as well, and there'll be sunshiny all day down there as we will will be in Boston. Both places will be in the 70s, except in Boston, probably a little bit cooler. We find some of the suburbs right now down in the 40s, in some of the lowlands, 43 in Norwood, 48 in Fitchburg. And as we take a look at the satellite imagery, we still see Hurricane Erin out at sea, but still moving away from us very slowly, though. And we do have clouds on the approach from the west and northwest. So the day will feature lots of sunshine from here to New York City, and it will be just a light breeze, which will support a sea breeze. This afternoon, some patchy cloud cover could show up, mainly going across northern and western New England. We'll see a few clouds in Boston, but only up to 69 along the coast here in Boston to the mid-70s inland. Again, about 75 down towards Hartford and New York City. High tide will be occurring coming up this evening. As we fly in, we see a new tropical depression forming in the Gulf of Mexico. Tropical storm Felix way out over the Atlantic, and of course Erin. And we'll be watching all of these features closely, but Erin is moving away from us at the present time. So as we go to the four-day planner, we see that it's going to be a sunny day, 68 to the coast, 75 inland. There'll be some showers late Thursday night and Friday morning. Very chilly weather for Friday, but clearing up for Saturday. And that's your forecast, Carrie and Scott.
Barry, thank you. It is 5:15 now. Let's go ahead and head on out to the roads and see how the traffic looks this morning.
Good morning, Rich.
All right, Carrie and Scott, thank you very much. Good morning. We're live in downtown Boston. Very light traffic. It'll be like this for a while, I believe, as state office buildings open and things get back to sort of normal. It'll still be an easy early morning ride. Looking at the expressway northbound, very light traffic. Nothing coming over the top of the Tobin Bridge. 93 looks like that. On the Turnpike inbound, light traffic around the Alston-Brighton tolls, and Soldiersfield Road and Storer Drive inbound as well. The T and Amtrak are on normal schedules today, and as we've said, Logan Airport remains closed this morning. I'm Rich Kirkland, WBZ-4 News. Back to Carrie and Scott.
All right, Rich, thank you very much. Well, we're all still trying to grasp the level of the devastation that hit our soil yesterday.
And WBZ's Ted Wayman takes us through the sequence of events as they happened.
American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, took off first at 7:45 yesterday morning from Boston bound for Los Angeles. 13 minutes later, another 767, United Flight 175, also left Boston for L.A. At virtually the same moment, United Flight 93, a 757, took off from Newark bound for San Francisco. And to the south at Washington's Dulles Airport, another 757 American Flight 77 flew off towards Los Angeles. The first time that anything was wrong was noticed by air traffic controllers who watched the jets stray from their planned routes. This computerized radar path shows the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, climbed out of Boston and was expected to head northwest across Massachusetts. But watch what happens. As the plane entered eastern New York, it turned sharply to the south and headed straight for Manhattan. The 767 hit the World Trade Center at 8:48 yesterday morning. And 16 minutes later, United Flight 175 delivered the second blow. The jets, fueled for cross-country flights, were filled with tens of thousands of gallons of volatile fuel. They were literally flying bombs, each with an explosive power far greater than the blast that leveled the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Based on radio communications from the planes, FAA authorities knew they were dealing with a terrorist attack and immediately moved to close New York and Washington airports. And for the first time in United States history, all flights across the country were grounded. But there were still two hijacked jets in the air, and one of them, American Airlines Flight 77, took aim at the Pentagon. It crashed in a fireball at 9:38. Meanwhile, the fourth plane, the flight from Newark to San Francisco, was heading west, and it traveled all the way to northeastern Ohio. The controllers monitoring radar watched as the jet did a U-turn and headed back towards the East Coast. At 10:20, 2.5 hours after the four-pronged attack was launched, the plane crashed in a rural Pennsylvania field.
I happened to hear a plane come through. It sounded like it was running normal. When it come down over top of me, I seen it go nosedive straight into the ground down here. Everything was running fine on the plane, it sounded like.
Authorities now say 285 people, it seems, died aboard the airliners, and this morning all flights remain grounded across the United States. FAA officials say they may reopen the national airspace sometime this afternoon, but then again they may not. In any case, when the flights do resume, we're told we'll see an unprecedented level of security for U.S. aviation. But even then, it will not be an aviation system very well equipped to prevent similar suicide attacks. I'm Ted Wayman, WBZ-4 News.
Well, no one has come forward to claim responsibility for these attacks, but federal agents say the main suspect that the evidence appears to point to Osama bin Laden.
Bin Laden is a fugitive Saudi millionaire. It is believed he's the architect of some of the worst terrorist attacks on Americans, including the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center and the bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa. The FBI is offering a $5 million reward for his capture.
Bin Laden has taken refuge in Afghanistan. Hours after the attack on America, explosions rocked the capital city of Kabul. The United States has denied any involvement in that violence.
Well, the terrorist attacks are also having a tremendous financial effect. As you can imagine, the U.S. stock markets are closed, but trading does continue overseas. Tokyo stocks plunge below the 10,000 mark for the first time in 17 years.
And there's also a fear the attack will lead to a gasoline shortage, and already we've seen some of the recoil on this aspect of the story. Wholesalers and retailers quickly raised prices yesterday in the Midwest, where some people were paying as much as $5 a gallon yesterday. The nation's largest oil companies have frozen their prices. They have pledged to keep distribution steady. Meanwhile, New York City plunged into chaos immediately after that first plane crashed into the World Trade Center yesterday morning.
And national correspondent Byron Pitts has the eyewitness accounts of the shock and all the confusion.
8:48 a.m. Mayhem in Manhattan.
We saw a plane coming very low, and everyone said, wow, that plane is very, very low.
Come on, guys, keep moving. I was walking to work, and all of a sudden, I see a jet crash into the first tower.
An American Airlines flight loaded with 92 people crashes head-on into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
And then we heard the crash. We ran to the window.
Into the building. It went into the Trade Center.
We hit the Trade Center. We saw the shrapnel fall, and then we said, get out.
And minutes later.
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit. Right. Oh, my God. Another plane has just hit.
I heard a roar, and I looked around thinking that it had to be a helicopter, and I looked up, and I saw the second plane hit.
What's a second commercial plane, a United Airlines jet, also hijacked, carrying 65 people, plows into the South Tower.
First one we thought was an accident. When we heard there was a second one, we definitely thought it was terrorism.
On the ground, witnesses could not believe their eyes. 70 stories up with the building burning. Reason gave way to desperation. New York's bravest never had a chance.
We really never even got to that close to the building. An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
Less than an hour later, the South Tower came crumbling down.
It collapsed. The top floors collapsed down. I saw it blow and then ran like hell. Thank God. I'm 69, but I can still run.
But it was far from over.
Tower 2 collapsed into Tower 1. Within minutes after that, we were ordered out.
When the dust settled, signs of life started to emerge.
Chaos. It's just chaos out here. It really is. So the Twin Towers fall. It's amazing. It's crazy. I can't believe this shit is happening. I really can't. It's nightmares. Armageddon right here.
This was the worst act of terrorism on U.S. soil, but not the first attack on the World Trade Center. 8 years ago, terrorists set off bombs in the basement in an effort to take down the two towers. They failed.
I tell you what, it's a sad day for America. It really is.
Firefighters and police officers and paramedics by the hundreds stood by, many of them feeling helpless. There was nothing they could do at this point because the building was still unsecured.
Our main priority is to get in, do a search and rescue, look for survivors, and then clean up what's left. And we can't do that until the building is deemed safe.
Ankle deep in debris and despair, rescue workers waited. Some had relatives of their own inside. One police officer told me her sister worked here on the 40th floor, due in at 9 a.m. She was always early, she said. Always. A sign on a paramedic's van spoke volumes.
We know we have some of the major brass of our department missing. We're trying to find them, too.
New York Port Authority Police Chief William Hall choked back tears. For him, this was no longer just work?
On a personal level, because I know that these are all your men and it's a business, but I'm sure that a lot of these guys are your friends. How you holding up?
Business now, it's personal now.
Sir?
It's personal now. We have to get them.
World Trade Center building number 7 collapsed, a 42-story building that crumbled hours after the initial devastation. It was the one calamity here that was not a surprise. Police had evacuated the area earlier, fearful building number 7 would indeed fall down. Minutes after the second tower collapsed, we met a firefighter named Tim McGee, a New York City firefighter. He was covered in soot from the top of his helmet to the bottom of his feet. He was crying. He told me that he had lost all of his men when the building collapsed. He asked us to reach his wife, Maria, tell her that he was okay, that he had survived. Quote, tell her, I love her.
Byron Pitts with an incredible report of the events of an incredible day, a day which has changed us all forever. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says that of course, the final death toll may not be known for days or even weeks, but he says the number will be in the thousands. There are preliminary estimates of the death toll at the Pentagon, 800 or more. So, and the rescue effort is, I mean, they were beginning this morning. They've been working all night, obviously, but the dust is now settled, and it's a very grim task. And there will be stories of hope in that rubble. There's been reports of cell phone calls from within
People still alive,
Twin Tower rubble, but of course many, many thousands suffered the ultimate fate.
And the part that's so heartbreaking, Scott, is a lot of the folks on board the planes were using their cell phones and plane phones to call their family members and tell them they love them for one final time. I heard this morning there was a young boy on the plane that called his mother on the United Airlines plane, and he said there was something going on in his plane. He just wanted to call and tell her he loved her. And that was the last, obviously, she heard of him. So we will, of course, have for you the continuing list of the victims' names on those flights coming from Boston as the morning continues for you.
These tragic events, there was some question as to whether voting should continue here in the 9th District Congressional race. In fact, there was an election yesterday in New York City for mayor's primary. That was postponed. However, here in Boston, the election was held.
Yes, it sure did. Stephen Lynch came out the winner in the Democratic primary. He led the way with 40% of the vote. On the Republican side, State Senator Joanne Sprague is the winner. She will face Lynch in the general election, which is on October 16th.
5:26 is our time, and let's get another check on the weather, shall we?
Barry Burbank, good morning.
Good morning, Carrie, and Scott, good morning. Hi, everybody. We're looking at a clear, cool morning around here, no question about that. And in Boston, it's 60 degrees, and down in New York City, it's 63. Both places are clear this morning, but in outlying locations away from the cities, we find much lower temperatures, 43 in Norwood, 48 in Fitchburg. So it is a chilly morning. The air is nice and dry, and it is clear right now. And we're watching Erin, which continues out at sea, still not that far away from New England, but just far enough to stay out there and moving away slowly, still creating some fairly big waves crashing on the New England coastline and some riptides. Meantime, we see some cloud cover moving across the Great Lakes, and it looks like most of this cloud cover initially is going to move across northern New England today, but we'll see some filaments or patches of clouds starting to show up here late this afternoon, and eventually we'll see some rain, and we'd like to see some decent amount of rain here, but it looks like just some showers coming in late tomorrow night and Friday morning. Nothing for today, though, as we have sunshine all morning. A few clouds this afternoon, mostly up to the north. A light breeze in from the ocean of 5 to 15 miles per hour will prevent the temperature from going any higher than the upper 60s along the coast, the middle 70s in the western suburbs. And down in New York City today, it'll be up to about 77 with sunshine all day and a light breeze. In terms of flying across the nation here and then looking out over the Atlantic, we have a new tropical depression in the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, Erin is moving away from the U.S. mainland. We have Tropical Storm Felix, which is way out here, and Felix looks like it's going to move in that particular direction. So this is the one we'll be watching for any kind of development over the next few days, as that tends to see some favorable conditions for its development as we go into the next 48 to 72 hours. So here we go for a nice sunshiny day. A few clouds later on, mid-70s inland, coolest at the coast. Tomorrow should be in the 70s again, but more clouds showing up. We'll get most of our showers late tomorrow night and Friday morning, and it's be very chilly on Friday, only in the upper 50s for highs, and recovering on Saturday as we have more sunshine to the low to mid-60s. And Scott, that's your latest forecast.
All right, Barry, thank you.
Let's get a look at your morning commute right now with WBZ's Rich Kirkland. Rich, good morning. How does it look out there right now?
Carrie, and it does look quite easy with traffic right now. We're looking live at the Southeast Expressway, whether we're here down by the gas tank or up here by the Fortress building or coming into the city. It's very light on the South Shore commute as well. I don't see any delays on Route 3 out of Plymouth, Rockland, Braintree at all. Even for this morning, at this time of the morning, it's very light all the way downtown. The city is certainly waking up. As you look at the traffic coming over the top of the Tobin Bridge, Route 1 all the way downtown. Again, no delays except for paying your toll. After that, traffic flows into town. But there's a general feeling that we're kind of getting back to some kind of normalcy. Keep in mind the T and Amtrak are running at a normal schedule today. Dan Ray at the airport has told us and that the airport, of course, is closed and will be for most of the day. We'll keep an eye on that situation. Traffic came in from Metro West. You had a chance to check out the Worcester situation. Worcester, Framingham, Natick, all the way downtown. Looks all right on the Turnpike. I'm Rich Kirkland, WBZ 4 News. Back to Carrie and Scott.
All right, Rich.